Running Sentences presents The Long Road to Get Home. Part 1. An adventure ends and begins. The last blow delivered to a mighty foe, a group of adventurers now faced the difficult trek to get home. This story is a work of fiction, so any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, situations, characters, businesses, events, and/or fictional ones from other stories, characters, businesses, events, and so on, is purely coincidental. Story written and narrated by Michael Honoré. Copyright 2024, Michael Honoré. All rights reserved. The dragon roars as it snapped towards the elven figure, which flashed by in a breakneck run, trying to avoid the clawed paw that was smashing towards it with a swipe. An arrow flinched through the air, catching the paw before it could land, and Clort, the dragon, drew back for it with another roar. This barely escaped, as the elf and a brawny dwarf charged forward, with the support of a mage tossing spells, binding the dragon towards the ground, along with a skinny rapier in the hand of the dwarf, stabbed towards the body. A splash of ice covered the mouth of the dragon as it tried to roar again, and the rapier, then followed by another set of arrows, hit its body, piercing it and delivering the final blow, as Clort managed to break the ice, giving out one final massive roar, and then collapsed into the swamp. Exhausted, the adventurers fell to the ground, having won their fight, but it had taken so much energy to do so. "Where's Keith?" "I'm right behind you. Why?" "Oh, I thought you fell. Or at least I thought I saw you go down. I'm only seeing 4 of us." "Langer is down. I saw our rogue trying to sneak about, and the tail of Clort caught him." There was a bit of sloshing about in the swamp water from Cadia. She threw her bow back around behind her back and charged towards a floating object behind the dead dragon. "Over here. I think I still have a salve left to get him up." She moved to make sure that her bow was in its holstered spot on her back, and she was quick to dig through her bag and come up with a vial. It took a few seconds to reach the prone Langer, who was thankfully face up, as she poured the contents on a frozen wound on his chest. The liquid poured fast and coalesced around the gaping mark, some of it entering the wound and then the rest following it. A second later, the cold, frozen look warmed slightly as the wound magically began to close and heal itself. And that was followed by Langer as he coughed and tried to sit up before his eyes had even opened. "Still alive?" "Yeah, he's still with us." "Well, we need to find the thing that we were sent here for." "Oh, it's probably hidden in the half-submerged cave the damn dragon was living in. I don't want to go down there, though." "Why not, Keith?" "I'm squishy and it's underground. Plus, it might have had kids or something. I don't want to see kids' faces when it's expecting its parents or something." The dwarf barn, though, was already moving towards the body of the dragon and glanced beyond into the cave. It looked wet and dark in there. "Wizard of the world, Keith, would you happen to have a spell that could at least send some light into there?" A ball of light formed into Keith's hand and shot off in the direction of the cave. It didn't get far as it splashed and exploded against the back of the cave to reveal it was about 10 feet deep, and there wasn't much there. "Well, that means the cave either goes down or it wasn't its hiding spot." "Have you tried cutting up the dragon? Perhaps it is inside." "I hadn't thought of that, but it is worth a shot, Langer." With a grin, the elf raised their axe and sprinted towards the slain dragon, and with all the might they could muster, Eerie began slashing away, hacking the dragon into bits. The group sort of watched in awe as the whole sight, since Eerie rarely got to let out all of her frustration. And for her effort, they were all rewarded as a golden ball popped out of the throat section of the beast. Hey, there it is, right? Yeah, I thought I saw it got swallowed. Excellent, then all that is left is to head home. However, the group seemed more interested in relaxing at that moment than setting off for home. Langer was still being helped up by Caddy under the watchful eyes of Erie, who'd thrown the ball over to Barn and headed to help him out. Barn caught it and shook his head. Well, is a bit of a rest out of the question? I'm sort of almost out of spells for the day. Fine. Any complaints against that? There were a lot of headshakes now as they gathered up around one another. I do think we should move to higher ground or so, or to the edge of this swamp, unless we want to get turned into raisins by the water. Yes, I agree. I'll help Langer, and you lead the way, Caddy. No need to get jealous over Langer. He's only human, and I thought you elves only went for elves. You know nothing about our type and only believe stereotypes as always, Caddy. Stick to what you know, shooting arrows when no one is paying attention. The two glared at one another for a moment, before the others in the group began to push them onwards to get out of the swamp. The trek through this place was slow going, with no signs of edges coming to them. The group had stopped a couple of times at places that looked promising for staying for potentially a night, but then pressed onward, finding a new place as evening fell. The rest that they had gotten after the defeat of the creature had been shorter than they had wanted, and they had to press onward, since they didn't really find much land to rest on. This new spot, though, was okay, and it was an uneven ground that made it hard to build a fire, along with the fact that they only had wet food now. Still, they settled down for a night, taking shifts, looking out for anything unusual.
Erie and Langer found themselves taking up that first watch,
and stared out at the dark, occasionally burbling swamp around them. So, what? Is there a problem? Did you spot something? No, a little confused about something I heard and was hoping for clarification from you. What did you hear? What is it? You're the rogue. You should be able to pinpoint where this thing is. Erie was on her feet and was listening for any signs other than the usual burble from the swamp. No, not out there. I just, when we finished the fight, Caddy said something to you. Erie immediately seemed to darken in what little moonlight was breaking through the heavy cloud on the area, and then paled a bit. Ignore that. You weren't supposed to hear it. Also, why were you listening in to private conversation? I was kind of right there. Couldn't help it. She turned and looked away, concentrating on another area of the swamp. So let's just do what we're supposed to be doing and don't talk unless it's important. Nothing unimportant. Confused and a bit lost, Langer did as he was told until their shift ended and he could go get some sleep. He contemplated for a moment more, saying more, but chose to sleep as Barn had woke up and taken up that next shift. With that, the night went by with no further interruptions. When the sun broke into the morning, the broken swamp with its twisted trees and dark murky water that came up to most of their knees was all that was before them, except for Barn, whose stomach got covered by this water. The going to get through was once again slow but steady, with the morning going by without much talk between any of them. By mid-morning, though, the edges of the swamp had become visible, and their pace had picked up, with everyone doing their best to keep moving. None of them were letting their guard down, ready for anything, even though the swamp was calm. Too calm for their liking, but it was calm. There wasn't even an insect noise to distract them from the endless sloshing that they made. By late morning, they would finally clamber out of the wet, sunken mud and onto the shore and firm ground, which they were all thankful for. A gnarled, twisted forest lay before them, ahead of them, but for the moment each just sat down on the ground, collecting themselves and taking in the swamp that they were leaving. It is weird that dragon had its home in the middle of that swampy area. We don't get paid to ask questions about that barn. He was not paying attention to Caddy's comment as he was holding up the golden ball that they retrieved out in front of himself. It was constantly being moved about in his hands to study the markings on the divided up sections of it. Didn't our employer or whatever, the guy that hired you, say it was an old magical item from elves? Perhaps you would know something about it then, Eerie? Well, no, it isn't from my group of elves, so if it is our species, I've never heard of the Ball of Corpses. But then again, my little tribe is cut off from much of the world. And what about you, Keith? You're supposed to be the smart one around here when it comes to magic. Can't you check it out? With a sigh and a shrug, Keith went over and took the ball, looking it over. He too spun it about with his hands, making it go round and round until he was satisfied, and then deposited it
back into the hands of Barn.
Well, I don't have a spell ready, but what I can see is that it's an odd ball with plenty of fancy, weird writing on it that I don't really understand. Perhaps we can get somewhere with more knowledge, and maybe I can get the ingredients to a spell that will figure it all out. Yes, of course. Let's just hide this away in our rucksack and get going.
We've spent long enough standing around here, and we really do need to get moving. So, are we all dry?
Nods were given all around as they collected themselves and began the trek into the forest. With Langer and Caddy taking up the lead, the group moved through this area and down into a new hilly one where vines and rocks covered the ground as trees covered all above them. The cover was good since it kept it cool on what was really a hot day, with the afternoon now upon them, but it also made them aware that things could hide in the shadows what they couldn't see. Their pace wasn't slow, but it was more careful. I have to say that this is one of the odder jobs we've ever been on since joining up together. What's so odd about it, Eerie? I don't know, Fully. We barely been together for that long doing odd jobs, and then we get an important one? Who was it from again, Barn? A prince of some sort? There was a rustling from a nearby tree, which sent them all to a crouch as they looked for cover and over towards that area. Nothing appeared, and after a minute of waiting, they decided to continue moving. Well, it's probably because we don't charge as much as others do, or as others were asking. And are we just going to ignore that weird noise that we heard, or what? Nothing showed up? Do you want us to wait forever to get this deal done with? Keith, who was near the back of the group,
shook his head in frustration,
and then continued to look about. The sound had come from his back right, and he didn't like being last in line when sudden noises appeared. His hands weaved signals to have a spell ready, but never quite completed them, so that they wouldn't be wasted. We were chosen because we were recommended to this person, weren't we? Yes, we had a letter from Crater Flan, and the businessman who has his hands in all sorts of things. But we've never worked for Flan. What's with the questions about this now, Eerie? The job's done, so what do we care? I'm just saying it was odd that we'd had all of this happen, Caddy. Let's just keep moving, and if you think of something that might lead to answers about the ball, feel free to shout them out. The journey continued with them being careful and keeping them on their toes. Nothing bothered them through this portion of the journey, as they were ready for anything. The woods, though, were relentless in how they felt like they were closing in on them and around them with how thick they were growing. But then things seemed to lighten up just up ahead. Langer, who was now fully in the lead, looked at the sight curiously and then brought the group to a stop. We got something different up ahead. What do you guys want to do? Allow me to take a look, then. Grateful for the moment to be away from the back of the line, Keith took a step forward and tossed out a spell from his hands. A heavy wind blew past them for a moment before things settled down and his eyes had closed, and then, a second later, opened them up again. We have a road ahead of us that looks clear.
We stopped for a road?
Well, Caddy, it's a bit weird to see a clearing in the middle of a forest. How do we not know about it? And, isn't it your job to hold on to the map, Caddy? You're very good with directions. It was mostly soaked in the fight in the swamp. It's not my fault that these things get messy. Fights always get messy, and things always happen. It would have all been better if our wizard knew teleportation. I can't learn every spell, Eerie, and I haven't come across that one yet in my years of trying to become a wizard, so my apologies. Barn ripped out his blade from his scabbard, causing a loud swing noise from the metal blade meeting a piece of hidden metal carefully in the scabbard. They looked to him as he put the blade back. No time for fighting or arguing. We have to finish our job. We don't have time. Let's get to this road and we will figure it out, okay? There were a few nods from the group. Keith, was there anyone around that road? It was crystal clear from what I could see. Not waiting any further, they began heading towards the clearing, stopping just at where it began. The dirt road sat in the middle of it, going from east to west, with both directions taking sharp turns, obscuring where they went, but away from them. For several minutes they stayed quiet, watching for any signs of anything, but it remained quieter than quiet in this woods. If this road was used, it showed no signs of it from what they could see from their positions. Well, Barn, what do you want us to do? What do you want to do? We can't see anyone, and our map is mostly useless, plus from what I could see, this road isn't marked on it. The group looked to Barn, who stepped carefully out into the clearing, but not to the road. He looked about, then dipped back into the woods with a frown. This place is certainly strange, and this mission seems to be getting odder. We shouldn't accept it at face value. But... He frowned as he looked between Eerie and the road. To not use a road would be a bit silly since it is here. Then the only question that remains, leader, is which way to go. It tracks east-west, right? Langer held up the compass for Keith to see which way south was pointing, which was behind them. I don't get that compass. Well, it was specially built for this sort of place. I don't know how it works other than magically, and that we need to be wary of south, which is behind us. That's great. So can we choose a direction to go in? Langer? Keith? Barn? Yes, we can, Caddy. If Langer would be so kind as to sneak his way up to the left and see where the road curves to, please. With a nod, Langer checked the compass once again, noting that it was south was behind them, just to make sure, and then took off as stealthily as possible. 100 feet were crossed easily by Langer, who kept glancing over the ground that had been cleared. It was unusual, since the area was flat as could be, yet the forest was made up of bumps and rocks and gnarled roots. Nothing about that was even, and had often slowed them down. Which just made the whole thing rather confusing. How would someone clear out this and then leave the rest of the forest? When he arrived at the bend in the road, it was clear from what he could see, and so he decided that it wouldn't harm him to look further, so he turned up turned and followed it for another 100 feet or so. It then made another turn back towards the east. Fuck, this complicates matter. What if this road is just a giant circle of some stupidity? Whatever. He looked back down the road to see the turn on the other end of it when he recrossed that 100 feet. It seemed to turn upward, which meant it felt like it might be the case of it being a giant circle. Or it could be the whole thing went in a different direction. It was hard to tell from here, and the question with going back or exploring more was the foremost on Langer's mind. He really didn't want to make a choice at that moment,
especially one that might get them in trouble.
Shit on a stick, I don't like this. He began running back towards his friends. When he returned and reported what he found, I left the group little choice but to see what the other side had to offer. This time it was Caddy who ran off to see what she could see. Her fleet feet kept her moving until she got to the bend, and then where it turned up, she paused for a moment. The road, from what she could see, looked like it turned west some 100 feet after this turn up. She, too, looked back at her companions, wondering if she should go check it out. I'm fast and nimble. They won't miss me for more than a few seconds. And with that, she quickly sprinted across the clearing of the road to the other side. The woods over there were just as bad, with the gnarled trees and big roots jumping over rocks. In fact, it might have even been a bit worse, which made her stay closer to the clearing in the road than she would have liked. No big deal, just straight to the next turn. Running as fast as she could, she hurried up that distance to the next turn. Coming to a stop next to that spot, she took a moment to look around behind her and to her sides, mostly to catch her breath, but also to make sure there weren't any creatures about to attack her. Nothing appeared, so she looked at the road and all around. Here, after it turned back, it made a quick turn up after only a few feet. Well, that's confusing. Why is this road so twisted? There was a growl of a noise that came from somewhere deep in the woods, not far from her, but still a decent distance away from the sound of it. She spun and looked for it, but couldn't place exactly where that noise had come from. It sort of sounded like a cat, and she loved cats. Kitty, are you a big cat or a little ferocious creature? What is it that you are hunting? Me? Am I being hunted, or are you hunting something else? Another growl roared, sounding close by, but all over the place, bouncing about the woods. It unnerved her as she pulled her bow around and grabbed at an arrow. At first she didn't notch it, as she continued to look about, kneeling down, trying to get a sense of where this was coming from. It could be anywhere, and the last thing she wanted to be was separated from her friends. If you think you're after me, and if you think you can get me, you should have already attacked me, beast. Silence from the creature, who Caddy felt like was watching her for what she was about to do. It was waiting for her to make a move, so it can make its move. Taking a careful step back the way she came, Caddy continued scanning her surroundings for any activity. Nothing could be seen. Can anyone see it? There was a hope and a prayer that her companions, having heard the noise, would come rushing towards her last location. There was no sound that they recognized her question, which left her little choice. Back she had to go, and hurriedly, keeping an eye out on things, she took off, trying to keep her view on all things and the arrow ready for a moment's notice. Dashing her way back to the first curve and then across it, she stopped for a moment to take things in. No noise or signs of anyone, so she barely spent more than a moment there before taking off again, heading back towards her friends. When she got back to them, they looked up rather surprised to see her sudden appearance and an exhausted look. Did something happen? Well, there is a creature out there somewhere. Didn't you hear it? No, we heard nothing but the wind. What was the sound like, and did you get any answers on your little journey? Well, the road turns up, and then when I went further, it turns up again. So it might or might not be the circle that Langer was talking about. As for the creature, it made a sort of growl, cat noise, and so I made my way back here quick. The group looked about the trees and what they could see in the clearing that made up the road ahead. No signs of anything were around them, so they all looked at Caddy. She was shrugging in return.
Can we move on then? Keep going this way that we're going? Why are we going this way, Caddy?
From what is left of this map, Keith, there is a town that is not far away from this swamp.
And it was supposed to be to the north, right?
Yes, north of the map, Langer.
Right then, we press on towards this town and keep an eye out for this creature. Yes, we need to get moving. We don't have time to stand around, as you've pointed out, Barn. Right, we are on a timeline for this job, so let's go. With Keith now taking the lead this time around, the group set off, crossing the road to the other side. They decided not to follow the road, and the woods here were thick and heavy, providing lots of cover for them, but also lots of ways to get snuck up on. It was also darker here as they trekked through it, and forced Keith to deploy some of his magic lights to guide them through this mess, of course watching carefully as they went. The more they moved about, though, the heavier sound of rustling among the leaves and strange quiet noises kept reaching them and fading away before they could react. At some points it came from in front of them, at some points to the side, and at other times narrowing in behind them. Wouldn't it be better to stop and deal with this than whatever it is we are doing? We can't see it, so it would be silly to try and attack. The best move and our biggest need is to keep moving. Don't waste time thinking about it, Eerie. We have to think about it, otherwise it will get the jump on us. Barn, I don't know how many healing spells anyone here has, or potions left for that matter. Barn merely nodded to Keith as their trek was not going well, as more roots of trees and thick trees themselves provided lots of obstacles. One second they'd be climbing over a rock or root, the next confronted by a large tree standing right in front of them. The noises grew to either side. I know what it is. We're being hunted by calicos. We're in a strange place far from home, another realm, dimension, possibly, and you're certain those are the creatures you read about, Caddy? She paused for a moment, looking back at Langer, who questioned her, and then around to her friends. Everyone was still moving through, though the exertion of it all was taking its toll on them, as humidity had really set in. Yes, I've read about them and where they're found. What are they? Big cats. Giant ones that can swipe at trees, knocking them down if they wish. Although the trees have to be not as thick and big as these ones, but yeah, they can do it. How are they getting through this woods, then, to chase us? They had slowed for a moment, some catching their breath a little bit, while the others looked around for these big cats. Well, they're not giant cats that can't move between trees. I think you're thinking of the ones the size of these 30-foot odd tall trees. No, these ones are just 10-foot tall and built of pure muscle. Well, where did you learn this?
Do you remember how to fight them, or what was it in this book that you read about them? And can we trust what you read is true? A loud, heavy growl came up behind, which caused Langer to spin about with his favorite short sword in hand, ready to toss it if necessary. The noise was there, but no creature was there. It was at the Blast Void City Library at the university when I was a student. Very trustworthy establishment, though I can't speak for how honest the books were, since some books are filled with rubbish, and so far everything it's said fits with these types of creatures. There was a snapping of a branch, which caused them all to look up to see a dark, spotted, giant cat glaring down at them with gold-red eyes. It let out a rumble of noise, and then jumped to another tree, disappearing from view for the moment. Back to the question of, did your book
say how to fight them?
Well, I can't actually remember if it said anything at the moment, Keith. Well, Catty, you better remember quickly. I think I spotted at least 2 others circling around us.
Noises gathered all around, from growls of the branches of the trees, and the trees protesting under the weight of the animals. The group of adventurers, known as Venture, gathered around in a circle, with their backs to one another as best they could. The ground made this a little difficult, since it was so broken up and uneven to stand on. There would be no more trekking forward for them as they huddled together. A plan of action, boss? Defend ourselves until Catty can remember something. Use whatever you've got.
Most of us use long-range attacks, though. How are we to deal with these threats which are going to come in close to attack?
The calicos had landed on the ground, and now took to circling around them. 3 massive beasts of cats that would disappear around trees and reappear moments later, their vision never wavering from looking at them. Worry about what their creatures' weaknesses are, please. We will deal with them as best we can and hold them off. And you long-range attackers can attack from your range when the moment strikes. Iri, we need to attack to throw these animals off balance. Can you do your usual moves?
I never say that word, since it is so overrated.
Come on, it's perfect time to say it and charge forward. Iri merely gave Barn a look as she pulled her axe off of her back and with a shake of her head charged forward towards the closest beast. It took this chance to snap off a growl and turned to move away from them. A spark of a spell from Keith shot off after, but it skirted off the animal's hide and then slammed into a nearby tree as the animal vanished from view. To Iri, she was trying to keep up with where the creature might be going, with the question in the back of her mind if this was the right thing to do. It's run away, leave it alone. She paused at Keith's words and glanced to either side to see if the other 2 calicos were doing anything. Both had vanished for the moment behind what appeared to be trees and rocks.
Fuck, where are they?
Fearing it was a trap, she began moving back towards the group. It looks like they want to lure us out. We'll have to stay together. A fine plan, but the group also, slowly, one by one, realized they couldn't just stay where they were. They would have to move about at some point, thanks to hunger or exhaustion. Langer played with his short sword for a moment, looking for when the cats were looking away. When he felt like they were, he moved, trying to keep low and stealthy as possible. It took only a moment for the others to realize he was gone.
Langer's trying something stupid.
Damn it, look for where the cats are going and try and spot him. You want us to spot a rogue whose job is to sneak around and be unseen. Iri, you have a connection with him mentally. You can find him, right? Iri nearly spun around on Catty to stop this wild accusation of having some sort of connection as she rejoined the group. I do not. I think he went over there, by the way. She pointed off towards where one of the cats seemed to be running away from them. Take someone with you and try and double-team the cat. Hit them before they get to us. It was Keith who would move towards where Iri was pointing, with her following a moment later, both trying to run, and was almost instantly slowed as they had to clamber over rocks and roots. Fuck this! Stand back! Holding out his hands in front of him, Keith summoned a red-orange ball that circled his hands for a moment. Then in a flash, a burst of flames erupted in straight lines from where he was pointed, covering a good 30 or so feet. The calico, though, seemed to sense that something was wrong, as it shifted and bolted out of the aim of the flame. its path now headed straight for them, which Eerie took as a challenge. With axe in hand, she moved straight towards the calico, which was now jumping from tree to tree, avoiding having to climb over anything. "You better have a spell ready for this. I have to watch my back as much as I'm watching you, so it might take a moment or two. And watch yourself as well. We don't know about the other creatures." The calico had jumped its final distance straight towards her, and she, at that moment, realized she wouldn't be able to fully swing her axe about to hit it. The side of the blade would have to do, as she brought the axe around with a single motion, the blunt side catching the nose and part of the cat's mouth as it snapped its head, trying to sink its teeth into the metal and wood, locking it up. Shit, grabbing my axe, I need this. Help. I got it. A ball of energy slung past her, striking the top of the head of the calico, which roared in a daze, and let go of the axe, which now freed her grasp. She tried to get her weapon ready to strike, but the animal struck first, with the sweep of its paws, claws extended, slashing at her torso. "Stand down, beast!" Barn ran up with the blade, singing its way towards the paw that had struck at Eerie and slashed it. The calico recoiled for a moment, but it didn't feel like the blade had drawn blood, as it now vanished behind the tree as a few arrows struck at a nearby other tree, scaring away one of the other creatures. "Shit, I need some help up here." Not far behind them, Caddy, who had been hiding up on a branch of a tree, was now trying to get away, as a third calico struck at her with its claws. It dug into her legs with a swipe and sent her tumbling back towards the ground. The other three hurried back to try and scare off the beast, who was lording over her for a moment as she tried to get up from her fall, only to trip over a root because of her freshly wounded leg. "Spell coming its way." Another blur of light shot from Keith's hands, striking the animal, which recoiled. This right as Langer came down from the tree, trying to hit the calico. His short sword was aimed downward for a blow, but now met a rock, since the cat had moved away. The shock shook Langer, which was followed by a quick strike with its claws at his head. It caught him, sending him spinning around, and with that, the calico made its escape.
"Are you two all right?"
The three joined their two companions, helping them get up, while keeping a lookout for the beasts.
"I almost had it, Keith."
"Your attack would have done little to them. They have tough skin and hides, and most attacks merely scare them." "That's not good, Caddy. You're saying they have no weaknesses?"
"That I can remember? No, not really, Barn."
They huddled for a moment, looking around for these cats, but could not see them. "Well, we can't fight, so we should run and fight. Keep them at bay until we can get somewhere safe. That's better than, sitting here and getting attacked."
Keith offered, as he pointed away towards the woods, to give them some place to go.
"I hate that. My blood says fight to the last man. We don't want to die, Barn, and we have a job to complete. Like Keith said, we need to move since we're wounded and stand little chance of getting anywhere with our attacks against them." Langer had gotten up, trying to wipe some of the blood from his eyes to clear his vision. He took a moment to orient himself
and help Caddy as she wrapped up her torso wounds.
"We move in a line and run for it, then?" The town is nearby. It shouldn't be far, I think. It's in the woods, from what the map showed, and the beasts hate lots of people, from what I remember, so it's perfect for us." Before Barn could protest once again, he was picked up by Langer and Eerie as they decided that he wasn't going to get his chance to just stand and fight, as the group set off in a hurried step. They only held him down for so long, and they made it about 15 feet before they had to set him down. He was kind of a heavy dwarf. I can run on my own 2 feet, thank you very much.
Yes, you can, but you wanted to fight.
He shook his head at Eerie, and now fully able to defend themselves, they moved along. The calicos harassing where they could with swipes and bites, trying to dive in and out of the group where they saw moments to strike, but disappearing before the group could really get an attack back. The rough terrain made it hard for all of them, but they pressed on in the humid afternoon air, despite the cool cover the trees had provided. The dings and cuts they took from the woods and the cats was frustrating as it slowed them down. However, things had begun to weed out a bit, and the ground actually was steadying itself, evening out, as well as the trees thinning out, and now these calicos were easily visible, but they were now keeping their distance. Keith, can you spellbind them or something to distract them or whatever, or do you have any good spells? What do you mean, other spells? Asking that is like asking me how to fight some other blade, Barn. If you're not exact in what you're asking, I can't answer you. To this, Barn offered his friend a shrug. Instead, they concentrated on the now flat ground and no rocks, as the mostly tired group was now all out running. The beasts were close enough to make their presence known, but they weren't trying anything else at the moment, and Keith was tossing a few balls of light towards the closest one, which they would easily dodge, but a flash of light came a moment later, blinding at least 2 of them for a moment. I doubt that's the spell you wanted, but it's what I can do at the moment. Their pace was too much, and had begun to slacken to a jog when Caddy pointed towards an area up ahead. The road, I bet it leads to the town. No one voiced a strong opinion against heading for it, and so that is what they did. And now, with the forest falling away from them, they could see something not too far away. Is that the town? The rush forward continued with no one bothering to respond to Langer's question. They could all clearly see for themselves that something was ahead, and it looked town-like. That and the cats were now dropping further and further back, growling and giving out wails of noise. The question on all of their minds was mostly as to why it had been so easy, and why the calicos were so afraid of a town that didn't look like it had any people in it. End of part 1 of The Long Road to Get Home. Thank you for listening.